morning. My name is Megan Kuhn, and I am the moderator for today's presentation, Voices of Change Recovery Stories. I want to welcome everyone to the Opioid and Other Drug Virtual Series provided by St. Clair County Community Mental Health in partnership with the Community Services Coordinating Body. This webinar series is made possible by a grant awarded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. We are excited to provide this virtual series during the month of September, which is National Recovery Month. I want to share a few tips and housekeeping items to ensure an engaging and interactive session today. Today's session is being recorded. We want to encourage you to enter any questions and comments you have at any time throughout this webinar using the chat feature found at the bottom of your screen. If time allows, we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can at the end of this presentation. We hope that this chat box will serve as an interactive space to share different strategies, ideas, and resources related to our topic today. Continuing education credits are offered today for individuals that have registered for CEs at registration. This session is offered on Facebook Live. CEs are not eligible when viewing on Facebook Live or any recordings of this presentation. Please make sure when you signed into the series, you use your full first and last name. If you need to change your name, you will need to log out of the webinar. Click on the webinar link again, and you will be prompted to enter your name and email. You must be logged on for the entire duration of the presentation. Participants who are not logged in for the duration will not qualify for CEs. If you find yourself losing connectivity, just log out and log back in. CE credits will only be provided to those who complete a short quiz and survey after this webinar. These materials were included in your registration email and must be completed within 7 days. This series will have an in and out code that participants will need in order to complete the quiz. Today's in code is PEER in all caps, P-E-E-R. Today we are fortunate to have two presenters, Devon France and Reva Mitchell. Devon France is a person with a passion of helping others, which has blossomed out of her own struggles with mental illness and addiction. She has a bachelor's degree in social work and will be completing her master's degree in social work from Wayne State in December. She is always open to sharing her struggles with the hope that recovery is possible and all of our dreams can awaken and be achieved. Reva Mitchell is a limited licensed clinical social worker. She graduated with a master's in social work from Wayne State University and a bachelor's from Baker College, where she majored in health service administration. Over the last 15 years, her resume is colored with a variety of jobs working with diverse populations, which has deeply influenced her work with people. She has a deep passion for helping people through the impact of significant life experiences, such as substance abuse, domestic violence, and trauma. She is employed at Port Huron Odyssey House, and it is her passion to help people find healing, understanding, and reconnect with life and move forward towards a happier life. With that, I'll turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you, Megan. Hi, everyone. My name is Reva, and I'm a recovering addict. First, I'll give a little disclaimer. Please forgive me if some of my language kind of slips. Just want to say that out loud. My goal in sharing my story is kind of help to reduce a stigma of addiction and people's perception of what an addict looks like and that change is possible. I'll give you a little background on my story. I came into the process of recovery in 2003. I am grateful for facilities that allow you to come in with your children. And so I'm a big advocate for those type of programs. I came into recovery to a residential program with my two youngest children. And for that, I will ever be grateful. And through that process, those are some of the people that have helped me along my way. I came into treatment and I was kind of lost. Let me say that. I was kind of lost. I came in this process as a widow. So I understand dealing with grief and trauma when I came in. And it was hard. It was hard in the beginning. But what I'm grateful for, and I might jump all over the place, so please forgive me. What I'm grateful for is that I started to give myself a break. And so I came into residential treatment, and I had my two youngest children with me, as I stated before. And for me, that was important to me because at that moment in my life, I didn't have anyone to watch my children. So when I talk about having a place and a program that women are allowed to bring their children, I think that is very much needed. Because at that point in my addiction, my parents were kind of tired of me. They weren't going to continue to take care of my children. And so I came into residential treatment with my two youngest ones. And, when we in the field talk about developing coping skills, for me, having my children there helped me learn how to do that. I had the opportunity to practice some things head on. So for anybody questioning whether treatment centers are important, one for women and children, I think are very vital. I understand today, as a person in long-term recovery, that my addiction started, I think, for my need to fit in. For me, I wanted to fit in. And maybe it's because I was an only child. I believe, are many factors as to why that was the understanding that I needed. Like, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be like everybody else. I also understand that in my journey of recovery, a lot of it was because I had some trauma in my life. I'm a victim of domestic violence. I'm a victim of molestation. All these things that occurred to me is probably some of the reasons why I chose to use. I didn't know how to cope with that. Mentally, physically, none of that. And so I think early on, though, I began using at the age of 15, just trying to fit in, like I said before. And in all honesty, I understand that my using continued throughout my life in one form or another, whether it was alcohol, drugs. I continued to use to cope with life. And so it wasn't until my husband died and things were at a point of, I'll say, mass destruction in my life, that I chose to finally go back into residential treatment. For many of us, for myself, let me say that, some of us don't get it right away. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that was my first time in residential treatment. I have done outpatient, I did one residential treatment center, and then this third time, something clicked. Something in that process clicked. I might have been just tired, but something in that process clicked. So I went to a residential treatment facility, and I want to say throughout my story, like as you hear me share, there are many people that helped me, and I want to say the staff at that facility helped me. These were women who motivated me, they talked to me, even about some of the struggles they went through in their own life that encouraged me to make changes. Because don't get me wrong, it's not easy being in a facility of all women. I had my two youngest children, I had, and I'm in a facility and a place unknown to me with my children. But what I do say today is I'm very grateful for that. So on my journey of recovery, I stayed in residential treatment for approximately like 45 days. And that was very much needed. Because the reality is that they gave me 10 days. And in all honesty, I understand today that that's not enough time to even really change your life around. So I'm grateful for the extension that I had to do 45 days. Through that process, I continued going into a supportive housing program. And I think once you leave treatment is where I ain't gonna say the real process begins, but stepping out into the real world again was scary for me. I got two kids, okay, I'm not using, but at the same time, I had to really do life on life terms. And so how do I say it? I started doing the things that that the people in the program taught me to do, whether it was residential. I started to develop a routine for myself. How do I say it? I started to develop a routine for myself, and that meant what I learned in residential treatment helped me. I was encouraged to start going to meetings. And so the reality was that I really didn't have anything going on. Once I got out of residential treatment, I didn't know what direction I wanted my life to go in. I knew I needed to make some major changes in my life. But first and foremost, I was very scared of what path I needed to choose. But they told me in the beginning, start making meetings. So I, yes, am a person in the 12-step program. I'm a big advocate for that. So I started going to meetings, and when they asked me, how does this process, my journey of recovery, help me? Meetings were very instrumental in my recovery. Not only what I learned about myself, but meetings for me started to give me a routine. It started to give me some structure. You know, I didn't know what to do with my day on a daily basis, so I would get up and go to a meeting. And in that process, I took my children as well. They needed to start to see how I was going to change my life around. So for me, going to 12-step meetings started to give me a routine and structure, which not only taught me in the process of the 12 steps, but outside of my life. I had to learn how to develop making lunches, getting up, you know, practicing a schedule throughout my day. Also, I want to say that when I speak of the staff, okay, let me just say it like this. So I was in residential treatment and I started to maintain this program and then I started to get clean. And so then after I started making meetings, I still had to figure out what else am I going to do? I needed income. Let's get honest, I needed income. So I began to, I remember going up to the treatment center one day and asking them, you know, y'all hiring? And I was jokingly asking. I didn't think they'd take me seriously, but they told me, when you get a year, we'll hire you. So when I finally managed to get a year clean, I went back there and they said, yeah, and I was scared to death. I was excited, but I was scared. But they hired me, and through that process, I started to see, when I say people that helped me along my recovery journey, I started to see people doing things that weren't drug related. And so, how do I say it? Like, once they hired me there, I remember one day I was walking past the director's office, which is how I'm in my profession today. And I asked her, I said, what do you do? And she made it sound glamorous. She said, oh, I go to meetings and trainings and things of that nature. And I was like, oh, okay, I want to do that. She didn't tell me all the paperwork, but that's another story, which is how I ended up in the profession I am today. But through the process, like 12 steps taught me how to have structure, how to develop relationships, like, and I always have to share about the 12-step and the 12-step program because it's what has helped me the most. Like, I think coming into the process in my journey of recovery, I didn't even know how to be still. Like, my lifestyle when I was using was so back and forth and all over the place, I couldn't even maintain like a sitting still. And so when I talk about 12-step meetings, for me, it was vital and important to learn how to just be still. And in that process, I learned how to listen to others. And the biggest gift, I think, from that process was hearing my story from somebody who was totally different from me. I do know the next person speaking, Devon, and to hear her sometimes share some of her stuff, and she looked totally different from me, was a gift. Because I think for a lot of people in recovery, we think we're the only one that has gone through what we've gone through. And so that was a gift for me in the 12-step program, to hear other people share their story. And so I continued to go to meetings, and I started to learn about who I really am. And it wasn't so much, let me say this, it wasn't so much what other people said. It was kind of like, as you continue to stay clean, you start to find out who you really are. And that's some scary stuff. But I say I'm an advocate for the 12 steps because through that process, we have some things that we need to do. And so when we talk about emotional resilience and we talk about coping skills, some of the coping skills that I have to use today are 12-step stuff. I do 12-step work on a regular basis. I do journal because the only person that really knows about me is me most days, unless I choose to share it. And so through my journey of recovery, I have gained some people in my life who are very vital and important to me. And it's not monetary, and it's not none of that. These people started to believe in me. Like I said, when I walked past the director's office, She gave me hope. She took the time to sit down with me and tell me what this role that she had was. And it intrigued me. And in that conversation, she said, Reva, you can do this. That was the first time anyone ever started to believe in me, that I could be more than who I thought I was. And so in my journey of recovery, I remember my case manager one day said, Reva, what are you going to do with your life? And I was like, what do you mean? I don't know. And so she said, well, you need to get a job. You need to do something. And I was like, yeah, okay, lady. But I didn't know what to do. And plus, because I said I had two small children with me, I chose to go to school. And let me say this, the reason I chose to go to school, I was sitting at a meeting, again, one night, and I heard a lady share that she was a heroin addict, but she was in college. And I said, intriguing. And I felt like if she could do it, I could do it too. And so I signed up for school. And I'll admit, I didn't know anything about college. That was not something I thought I could do. But through the 12-step program and the process of this recovery journey, I learned how to ask for help. So I remember being in school and not understanding what to do. But the 12-step program told me you got to ask for help. So I would ask my peers in class how to help me. And so through that process, it instilled some self-esteem. And so I continued on this journey of recovery. And like I said in the beginning, I have learned how to, how do I say it? There's so many things I've learned, but I've learned how to be a parent again. Like I said, I have my two youngest children have been with me this whole time. And so when I say I'm an advocate for women's facilities, it's because they have watched me and they have seen the change in me. And so I had to learn how to manage both being a parent and stay clean. And it helped me show my children that you don't have to use drugs. And they started to have faith and belief in me, even in the sense that the people I was bringing around them, it instilled trust in them, because I'm not delusional that I traumatized my children during my using. And so when I say I recovered, they recovered as well. I share about the people in my life because I understand today without a support system, I'm nothing. If I don't have people that I can talk to about what's going on with me, I don't know I would be here. I've experienced some trauma in my life, clean. And I have learned through this process to have people that you can count on, people that you can talk to, whether they're male or female. I have a male mentor in my life that guides me through this 12-step journey, but also through life. Through this process, I gained a spirituality that I never thought I would have. As I stated before, there are people that I used to work with. Like I said, I ended up working in a treatment center. But they taught me how to have relationships. Some of those same people, I no longer work with that agency, but we maintain friendships. And they still encourage me today. That's the thing I've learned through this process of recovery. You must have a support system, or you should. I ain't gonna say you must, you should. I understand that today that I do. And the gift, I think, for me is that majority of my support system are nothing like me. We look totally different, we act totally different, but we have that common understanding that we're not trying to use anymore. The things I want to get for people to get out of this talk is that people coming into recovery, they need time. They need time, they need compassion, they need understanding, and they need support. And for people to understand that it's not going to happen overnight. There are so many things that we coming into this process are trying to work on or don't even understand that we need to work on. I had to work on my behaviors. I had to understand, like I talked about earlier, I had to develop some healthy coping skills. I understand today that dope is not the way I cope with life. I have to use some simple basic tools. Like for me, a big coping skill that I use is music. Music kind of calms the savage beast in me. But I also understand there's other methods and ways that I can help myself. And in that process, I in turn can help others. What I understand today about the journey of recovery is that I also have to be honest with people. And so I have managed through this process in these 17 years that I've been clean to repair some relationships. You know, my parents have gained some trust back in me. My children trust me today because, like I said before, I understand I've done some damage to them emotionally, physically. You know what I'm saying? Like, and sometimes it's hard to accept some of the things that you've done to others. Like I always share about the health and well-being of my parents is much better today. But I had to gain some acceptance that I caused some damage. You know, I'm trusted to come into my parents' home and things of that nature. They trust me. I'm the executor of their estate. You could have never told me that. But the journey of recovery, you have to gain some acceptance and be okay with the things that you've done. I'm okay today with who I am. And I joke, and I don't mean joke, but earlier today, I was asked, did I want myself to be public? And that goes back to the stigma of addiction. I worked real hard to get where I am. You could have never told me I'd be a clinical what? Anything. And so sometimes I still in the back of my mind struggle with exposing myself because I don't want that to be a hindrance. We have to stop believing that addicts won't change. I changed. You know, I have letters behind my name. You could have never told me that. And I'm gonna get honest, coming into this process, I didn't even understand what that meant. I asked somebody one day, what are these letters behind your name? And they were like, well, Reva, this means, and I'm being honest, this means this, this, and this. And I was like, oh, wow, I want some. And it was something simple as that. Somebody taking the time to show me and guide me what this means and believing in me that I could do the same, that I'm in the position I am today. Like I couldn't ask for more. So I encourage anyone into recovery, if you see something that you want to do, reach out for help, ask them. 9 times out of 10, people will motivate you to be something you never thought you could be. You know, but you also got to be okay with the parts that you need to work on. Like I understand today, even today, 17 years in, I still have a lot of work to do. I can't sit here and tell you I'm the perfect parent, but I'm a lot better parent than what I was when I came in here. You know, my daughter calls me her BFF, all them tech terms that she uses, whatever. You know, but that's a great gift today. You know, that's a gift. You know, and they have forgiven me for the things that I've done because I'm not delusional today that there are still some scars there. You know, I understand today that even today when I look, and they're adults, don't get me wrong, these are 25 and 23-year-old people. And the oldest one, we ain't gonna talk about him. But I understand today, even when I interact with my children, I see the damage. I don't voice it, but I can see sometimes in their behavior and their mannerisms how they got to be the way they are. But through the process of recovery, I gained some acceptance and I continue to work on me and continue to help them by changing my response sometimes to things. Um, I hate that word, but anyway, all I want to offer people is that anybody can change. Don't believe once an addict, always an addict. But I also understand you're going to have to make some major changes in your life. I personally don't hang around with people that use. Not to say that I don't know people that use, but I don't interact with them on a daily basis. And that sometimes means family members. Like there's so many things that have to be changed in this process of recovery, but it's doable. It is doable. But you got to have the willingness to do it. So I don't have much more. I do have much more, but I'm gonna keep it short. I am real grateful for this opportunity. I thank those who asked me, and I encourage anyone, please be an advocate for treatment centers. They are very much needed. Please be an advocate for women who have children. Please be an advocate for the 12-step program. All these things were vital for me. They might be different for everybody else because I do understand today that there are other methods and means to gain access to recovery. But overall, just give an addict a chance. Thank you. I could talk some more, but I'm not going to.
Hi, everybody. My name's Devon. I'm a person in long-term recovery. Before we get started, I had somebody send me something yesterday, which is just very fitting for the way my story began. So I'm going to read that to you and then I'll get into my story. I love an addict still suffering who just can't seem to find their way. A beautiful person inside and out that is bound by locks and chains. Only they hold the key to freedom. I stand here helplessly watching as they thrash and scream, wishing I could make them see. I cannot fight their fight. I cannot lose myself while trying. My life is full of questions. With every word, they're lying. Standing next to them, I'm lonely, missing who they were before, when it started out as fun, but then became much more. So today I must decide, will it hurt me more to stay or turn and walk away? Is it killing me more to watch them die than it will kill me to say goodbye? I love an addict still suffering who just can't seem to find their way. I'm always going to love them, but for now I can only pray. My story began very young. I was a victim of abuse in all forms, and I never knew how to handle that. So I began smoking cigarettes at 10 years old. I began smoking weed at 12. I was pretty heavily drinking by the age of 16 and starting to take pills. And it was all an attempt to escape what I was feeling in those moments. My dad growing up was an alcoholic and very abusive physically and verbally and emotionally. And then that left my mom, who, is a victim of her own trauma and abuse, being a survivor of domestic violence, trying to raise two kids on her own and having to work and be gone. And that left me and my little brother to kind of figure out life with, babysitters and people who really didn't have our best interest in mind. And so, we did the best that we could. And, it reminds me of all the education that I do have today, that like those trauma responses. And that's what my whole life was before I got clean. It was one big trauma response. And I put myself through a lot of trauma through my own using. The people that I would hang around, the things I would do in order to keep that state of mind of being high. At the age of 18, I had been hospitalized for the first time. I also am a person in recovery from a mental illness. I've been diagnosed with bipolar since I was 18. And have been on and off medication and was petitioned into the hospital multiple times by police and my mom. And nothing was ever enough for me. Like, it didn't matter. It was just like things kept getting worse and worse and worse to the point of homelessness. I'm 20 years old and nobody's talking to me of my family. All the people that are in my life are people that I maybe have known 3 or 4 months, because I would just jump around from different groups of people, just lost and not really knowing like what I'm supposed to be doing. Because I was in such a state of, trauma and addiction and psychosis and, struggling to know where I'm supposed to be in life. I dropped out of high school, technically in 11th grade, but I stopped going in 10th grade. Because the only thing that was important to me growing up was, how do I not be sober? And I remember having those thoughts. Like, I cannot handle my reality. The thoughts that I'm having, the flashbacks that I'm having, the lack of support that I have. You know, I remember one of the last times that I was in the hospital, I think I was 19, maybe 20, and the social worker came to me and handed me a social security application and told me, you need to fill this out because you're never going to be able to work. And I remember like vividly, like sitting at this round table with these blue chairs. And I remember his face, he had like gray hair and these glasses that like were low on his nose. And I remember sitting there and just like this pit in my stomach, like, is this really my life? Like, is this really what my life is going to be? And I remember like one of the last times I was in the hospital too, sitting in the corner of a room and just like begging God to let me be normal again. That I just wanted an opportunity. I just wanted somebody to give me a chance to learn how to live life and to show me how to live life. And it just felt impossible. A few months before I got clean, I had a friend I was in a homeless shelter, Salvation Army Mats, which is like one of the greatest divine blessings that I ever had in my life at that point in time. But I had a girlfriend who had reached out to me. I couldn't stop drinking. And they would make you blow every night to get back into the shelter. And I remember going to the bar and telling the bartender, like, I'm not going to be able to get back into the shelter tonight. So just, keep bringing them. And she was like trying to talk to me. And I remember vaguely like her saying something to me like, you're so young. Like, how did this happen? And I remember like seeing the pity in her eyes, but feeling the voidness of emotion in my body, like just not caring. And so I had a girlfriend who had reached out to me through Facebook, and she had said, Devin, I have an extra room. Like, why don't you just come back to my place? And this had to have been maybe a couple days before this. And so I had reached back out to her and I said, listen, like, I am so drunk. There's no way I'm going to be able to get back into the shelter tonight. If that offer is still up, I'd really appreciate it if I could come. And she brought me out to her house, and I was there for about 4 days, and I had left to go get drugs, and I was gone for maybe 4 or 5 hours. And when I came back, there was an ambulance and police, and she had completed suicide while I was gone that day. And I always share that because there was something about that moment that broke me. I had been homeless. My brother and my mom, who were the most important people to me in my life, had cut me off. My mom had kicked me out at the age of 16 and told me not to come back. My brother had exhausted himself trying to help me. I had friends. I was in and out of the mental hospital. I was in and out of homeless shelters, and nothing was enough. It was not enough for me. I had not gotten to the point yet where like I wanted to stop. And that day that I came home and she had completed suicide, and I remember thinking to myself and to think, or I wish I could say at that moment I stopped using. I didn't. It went on for a few more months. That was in August, and I got clean October 27th of 2011. So it went for a couple more months where I just pretty much went into a blackout on pills, on alcohol. And I had met this girl after that who had went to rehab. And at this point in my life, I was young. I had very little knowledge about anything other than how to get high. And I thought rehab was for like wealthy people. Like, I didn't think that like somebody like me could go to rehab. Nor did I even really know what it was like. But, the only person that had ever mentioned rehab to me was my own mom, who had attended rehab when she was like 16, who was paid for by my grandfather, who was wealthy. And so it just confirmed that belief for me that like rehab was for rich people. And the girl who went's family was wealthy. So it was another example. But anyway, while she left, she said, I just want you to try to stop drinking and taking pills while I'm gone. That was like another divine intervention in my life. because for the first time, I had really truly realized that I couldn't stop. I would always keep like something around, or like plan out my morning where I could be at the liquor store as soon as they opened, because, and I didn't know this at the time, but I was having extreme withdrawal anytime alcohol would start to come out of my system. Um, and I was taking a lot of different pills at the time too. So I had realized in those days that she was gone that I couldn't stop. That like this was not something I was going to be able to do on my own. So she got out of rehab and she said, I really think you need to come somewhere with me. And, we're sitting in this, trap house, for lack of a better term. I was homeless. The only thing in that house was a kitchen table and a bed in the back room. All my clothes were in this black trash bag. And she brought me a duffel bag and she said, just pack some clothes. My mom said that if we can find a place to live outside of this area, which we were in Mount Clemens, she said, she'll pay for us to move in. And I said, okay. So she packed a bag and we start heading up really far away from the city. And we get all the way to the end of 94. And I'm like, holy hell, where are we? And I had visited this area a little bit because when my mom had kicked me out at 16, she had actually moved to Marysville. So to me, this area was like the devil. I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to Port Huron or Marysville or anywhere near that place. And so that was the very first time I had even thought about this area when we're getting off the freeway. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are you bringing me here? And we pull up to a church and a bunch of people are outside smoking cigarettes. And I'm like, what kind of church is this? Like, and we get out of the car and we go downstairs and I'm thinking like, I'm just here for support for her. And it was a 12-step meeting and I'm sitting at the table and I'm like looking around at all these people and they start reading these readings, we do recover and, who is an addict and, all these things. And I'm hearing, and there's a part in one of the readings that says, we have tried all measures, psychiatric, religion, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know it verbatim, and I just start bawling because I'm like, oh my, because even through my addiction, I would like stumble into churches thinking that like, if I'm in the church, like somebody's going to just like pray over me and this is just going to be lifted. And like, and it never happened, obviously. But I had tried all those methods, in and out of psych hospitals, thinking that, these psych meds are going to save me. And so that night we're after the meeting. And I was just telling Reva this before, there was this man, his name was Steve Kidd, and he's now passed away and God rest his soul. But he saved my life. Because at the end of that meeting, my friend was like, telling our grand plan, we're going to find an apartment out here. We're going to stay together. We're going to get clean together. We use together, but we're going to get clean together. And, he looked at me and he said, if you really want to stay clean, I think you should talk to this woman over here. And she owned a 3-quarter house, which a 3-quarter house is a recovery house. It's like sober living. There's guidelines. There's, you do certain things like go to meetings. And so, I'm telling her, I'm like, I just got high this morning. Like, I don't know, like because she was talking about drug tests and all this stuff. And I said, I'm not going to pass it. Like, I said, but I can tell you right now, there is nothing for me where I just came from, nothing. And like, I am so broken. The last person that I thought was going to like help me and gave me hope is now dead. And I said, like, I will do anything. I don't care what it is. If you want me to stand on my head in the corner, like, if you can just give me some hope. And she said, okay, we'll be at my house, the next day, and move in. And so I did. I went to that 3-quarter house and I moved in and I stayed clean and I never used again. And, I always say that treatment is such a blessing for people and such a luxury that a lot of us don't have the option or the blessing to get to. And And that wasn't part of my story. I was 21 years old and I moved into a recovery house. And, they said you have to get a job and you have to go to 12-step meetings and get a sponsor and get into therapy. And, I'm so grateful for those guidelines that woman put on my life, because that is like what Reva was talking about. I needed structure. I needed healing. I needed guidance. I needed someone to say, Devon, you're not going to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning listening to music and smoking cigarettes. Like, you need to take your ass to bed. Like, it's nothing good happens after 10 o'clock, and I remember all these cliche things. I even remember Reva telling me in my early recovery, she looked at me one day, and it's one of those pivotal moments in my recovery. And she's like, if you don't trust somebody, Devon, you're going to die. And I remember thinking to myself, like, damn, that's harsh. But like, nothing was more true in that moment, because I had to trust that all these people, after coming out of a life full of trauma and addiction and mental illness, that these strangers were not trying to take advantage of me like all the people in my life had before. I had to believe and have faith that these people were going to guide me in the right direction. But I also had to know the people that I was reaching out to. I really had to ask for suggestions and take suggestions and talk to people. And so I did that. I stayed in the 3-quarter house for 6 to 7 months. And I went to 12-step meetings and I got a sponsor and I was in therapy and I talked about my trauma and I was giving coping skills. It was the first time that I was ever introduced to some form of like structured therapy where I didn't just go in and talk about my issues and feel like crap after. She taught me some DBT skills, and she had said, you can recover from this. You don't have to continue acting in these responses that you're having to this internal stimulus that you have. And so I did that for a while, and I didn't even have a GED or a high school diploma when I got clean. Michigan Works had this amazing program that paid for me to get my GED, and paid for me to get my certified nurse aid license. And from there, I started to volunteer and I started to help others, and I started to do service work at these 12-step meetings. I would go and make coffee every day at this 10 a.m. meeting at a Serenity Club we used to have in town. And what that did was that allowed me to have connection, because that is what I needed. I needed connection to people that were not trying to act out in the ways that I was trying to recover from. And that's what I got. I got connection from people that were trying to push me to higher levels of spirituality, that were teaching me what it was like to be a person with good motives, honesty, integrity, that gave me hope. And just like Reva said, seeing people, I never would have thought that I'd be sitting here and have the education and the knowledge that I do, the ability to be a mother. I have 2 young kids, and to be able to go through, these last 8 years in recovery, still making mistakes, because at the end of the day, the drugs and alcohol were not completely my issue. They were what I thought was going to solve all of my issues. I thought that drinking and getting high was going to help me have a better life, because I couldn't handle my reality. And what I learned is that I have the disease of addiction. So I can get addicted to exercise. I can get addicted to going to meetings. I can get addicted to food and talking to people and, just anything. When I am not treated, when I go untreated, when I'm not connecting to those people, when I'm hanging on to things, and not getting honest. One of our literature says resentment is a dubious luxury. I can't hang on to things that bother me, or when I feel like people are trying to hurt me, and not reach out to my support system and say, listen, like, this is what's happening. I have learned through the years that it is important for me to continue to have a structure, to reach out to people, because even I'm still in therapy today, and my therapist still doesn't truly understand me the way another recovering addict can understand me. So I have to know that there is people in this life that can understand me the way that I need them to, and I have to reach out to them. Life has come to being in recovery has shown me that I don't want to get high today. I don't want to use today. That's not a solution. In my mind, I don't even allow it to be an option, but I have a lot of other things that I can do and that I have to do. There are musts in my life. I must talk to people. I must attend 12-step meetings. I must go to therapy. For me, church is very important to my connection to my higher power. I must do those things. I must go running on my lunch break if I have to soothe my emotions. I must take a day off from work if I know that I'm not okay. Because starting off in CMH, I was a peer support. And, there was a woman named Tracy Matthews who was that another divine appointment for me. Because when I came to community mental health for an interview, I thought I was coming for like an office position. And it kind of was, I was hired as a mental health assistant. And then as I got to know Tracy and Amy, they were like, do you want to share your story with people? Like, do you want to, help people in their own recoveries? I was like, that's a thing. Like, that is something I can do for a career. And so from there, I was a peer support specialist, which then just fueled my passion even more to think like, I don't have to be that social worker that came to me when I was 18, handing me a social security application, telling me I'm never going to work again. I can be the social worker in the field going, I don't care how many times you've relapsed, you can do it again. You can get up and start over. You can do what you didn't do the last time now. Because I am going to carry the hope for people forever, because it only took a few people to intervene in my life to give me that opportunity, to give me that hope, to not talk down to me like I'm a piece of crap. Because if you think I'm a piece of crap or you're having any judgment thoughts about me, imagine what that person is having judgments about themselves. Because I felt like not even this big when I got clean. All the things that I had done, all the ways I had harmed people, all the ways I had disappointed people. And I didn't need anybody else judging me. I was doing enough of that on my own. And so even through my career at community mental health and through my education, it's been these professionals that have held the hope for me and looked at me like a human and have told me, Devon, it's amazing that you overcame all of this. It's amazing that you're still managing your mental health symptoms. It's amazing, instead of looking at me like, oh, I'm sorry, it just, our words are so powerful, but our body language is even more powerful. And I really try to stay mindful of that in my career now, and even helping other people in my personal time, because we as humans in the struggle of life and in our collective grieving, even right now during COVID and on a day like today, like 9/11, and the things that are happening in our world, and like, we have to support each other, especially being professionals or people in recovery in this field. We have to let people know that recovery is possible, and that mental illness and addiction is something that we can overcome. That recovery homes are not something that we need to try to push out of our communities, but something that we even need to even welcome and say, please, because most of the people I know are not from Port Huron, but most of the people I know got clean here in Port Huron, and we are now contributing to this community. And, those are the ways that I hope the stigma continues to end, and that we just bring awareness and education to people, that we're still people that struggle. And normalize it a little bit. So with that, I am going to end and just thank everybody for listening to us, and thank CMH for holding these things during Recovery Month to help us continue ending the stigma of addiction and mental illness, because we can recover. And that's the most amazing thing about all of this. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. That's all I got.
Hey, Devon, we just have a couple questions that came through from the chat, if you're okay answering them.
Yeah, for sure.
One question is, working in the recovery field, what do you do daily to has what you do daily to maintain your own recovery changed?
Yes. Do you want examples?
Maybe just a few, just for people who are interested maybe in a person who is in recovery and also working in the field? Your
Oh,
perspective.
I know for me, one of the most important things is to not attribute the way that I help people professionally to fulfilling my recovery personally, because it's totally different. Helping the people that I help professionally, being a person in recovery is definitely rewarding, but it's not the same as me sitting in front of a therapist for myself, or taking that break to go exercise, or sitting at a 12-step meeting and talking freely and openly about myself and my own struggles. It's not the same. So I have had to put in like more of an effort to separate those two worlds, especially working and living in the same community. It's easy to have some of that stuff overlap. And so to really just have strict boundaries, and not boundaries like on other people, but for myself, to say like, no, Devon, no matter how much you want to sleep in today, get your butt up and go for a run, or get up and go to a meeting, reach out to your sponsor, reach out to your, support group. Because what we do can be very draining, as a lot of us know. And so it's easy to like justify just staying in the house and watching TV because I had a rough week at work. Well, that's not going to help my recovery. So I would say that that's definitely how it's changed.
Thank you for that. Reva, can we ask a question of you as well? Okay, we just need to unmute. There we go. Okay. So a question that came in during your part of the presentation was, how do you pull yourself back into the present when your thoughts get too far into the future or too far back into the past?
And it might sound very simple, but I think I believe in affirmations, or I believe in positive talk to myself. So when I get drawn into my past or start to go back, I constantly have to tell myself certain things, like, Reva, stay out of the past. You can't change the past. It might sound very simple, but it is. Like I always say, the program has taught me, we always talk about just for today. I need to stay in today, because the reality is I really can't fix most of the things that have happened in my past. But I do use certain methods. Like I said, it might sound crazy, I talk to myself. I believe in my support system. I do reach out to others. I have a sponsor, and we talk on a daily basis. So when I start to share with her about past stuff, she's the one that'll tell me, why are you in the past? Why are we talking about the past? Or she'll guide me and say, how can you fix that? What can you do differently? So I work mentally very hard to stay in the present. And we all can kind of reminisce about the past, but the reality is we can't change that. But there are things that you can do. You might be I am my biggest cheerleader. Don't get me wrong, I have a support system, but I on a daily basis wake up and tell myself, I'm worthy. Reva, get out of the past. Stop being upset because of the things you did in the past. Those type of things. Like, I believe in telling on yourself. You might have to tell somebody one day, look, when I start talking about past experiences, please pull me out of that. So you do get a support system in your life that will help and guide you and just tell you the truth. Like I said, I have some people in my life who will tell me the truth. Like, Reva, why are you holding on to that? What benefit does that do you? So for me, it's a whole bunch of things. I constantly work at it on a daily basis, because in reality, I was scared to death to do this talk, because I will still tell myself sometimes that I'm not worthy. And so it's those positive self-affirmations that I tell myself, Reva, get up and do it. People believe in you. Start to change the perception you have of yourself. And that's only through doing some work. Did that answer the question for the person? I'm not sure.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Reva and Devon, for your time and information today.